my message in my book is that you don't have to become Gandhi, ridiculously disciplined. But if you just turn the dial down or up in certain areas, life is about trying to improve yourself.
Hey everyone, Raghu. I'm back with Mindrolling, and this is a long time coming. We just said, gee, when's the last time we saw each other? 40 years ago. Perry Garfinkel, so great to have you and catch up on this podcast. Perry has a great new book called Becoming Gandhi, and it has something to share for all of us in this very disrupted universe we live in here and disconnected, right? Welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to see you again. I think the last time we saw each other was probably in New York.
Yeah.
If not Queens, in Manhattan somewhere.
Yeah. Probably with David Silver, our good mutual friend.
David, I love him.
So, there's one, we sort of probably have, I don't remember, but I think we do have pretty parallel trajectories from when we were youth and what we went through, in that famous time in the 60s, 70s. Can you just say what I always ask this to all guests that I don't know or haven't talked to in a long time? Just what was it that was the fulcrum to allow you to even know? For me, I was such a you love Dylan, I know that, of course, who doesn't? But it was really important for me in my life. I was just talking to someone the other day about how when I first heard him in the mid-'60s, 63, 4, 5, whatever it was, I was like, shit. There's somebody else who feels like I do, that this is just fucked up. What we're handed here is untenable. However, I was thinking about it in my youthful mind. And the fact that he expressed it, of course, so incredibly through his music, I think it saved a lot of people. It was like your first community, right? Something like that?
We're talking about Bob Dylan?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember. It was, in fact, I think I was a junior or senior in high school. Bob Dylan was performing at the Mosque Theater in Newark, New Jersey. And I grew up in nearby West Orange. And this was one of the early concerts where he came out with just a guitar, the first half. And then when he came out the second half, there was a group of ragtag musicians that became the band. And
really?
He was booed. And what I remember most was I was with like 6 other guys who were, avant-garde, which, we thought we were in the 60s. And I remember that the acoustics at the Mosque Theater were not able to capture his words. Because, the theaters like that were not ready for amplifiers, the height of people. And luckily, I had been listening to Bringing It All Back Home endlessly in the den of our suburban house in West Orange, New Jersey. And as you said, Raghu, it was like a voice calling from afar, from a phone booth in the Midwest, as Dylan put it. And it spoke to me because I was living the ticky-tacky suburban life. And it wasn't me. And it was my father, and it was their dream to move from, Queens to New Jersey. That was the big migratory pattern. But as we're discussing this, Dylan was a portal, as we would say now, to more of that. And it was at a time when folk songs, folk singing, Peter, Paul, and Mary, things were shifting from the Kingston Trio. Yeah, but before that, it was, the Kingston Trio who were those Irish singers? The Clancy brothers.
Oh yeah. Wow, you're digging.
I know. And then came Dylan, and the doors opened. And then just about that time, the Beatles happened, and they were singing love songs. But as they evolved, Dylan and the Beatles opened more doors, and their paths crossed a couple of times in reality. But in our generation's mind, it was all leading us to some place that wasn't suburbia.
So for me, actually, I was heavy into traditional jazz. This is another famous story I tell many people. I just told it. I did a thing was on a panel for music and psychedelics nearby here in Santa Barbara. Yeah, I had a pretty great time looking at all of the product that they are putting together now. It's extraordinary. Psilocybin gummies. I mean, never heard of that. Stuff like that. Anyhow, they were talking about how psychedelics really enhance the music experience, which of course they do. And I said, but I have a little bit of a backward story, basically, because when I was 17, I'm from Montreal, and I don't know how they got me into a club, because I must have been drinking, and you couldn't get in until you were 21, I think. Anyhow, they got me in. John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones, right? Yeah. And Jimmy Garrison. And he played My Favorite Things on soprano, that famous song. And I left the body, actually. No drugs, no nothing. I don't even think, maybe I had tried pot or something at that time, but I was completely straight. And so I was telling these people, it was reverse for me. I went out on Coltrane and came back in, and a couple of years later was getting reassured that, yes, that interconnection and that going beyond what you, little me that you think you are, can happen under any conditions with any, not necessarily with a substance, but certainly psychedelics prove that out. Did that happen for you too?
Well, you don't know this about me, but I played drums all my life. Since I was 6 or 7 years old, and I started taking serious drum lessons in like the end of 5th or 6th grade. And my drum teacher was actually a jazz drummer who taught a lot of the jazz cats, drummers in Newark, Charlie Persip, Don Lemon. These are esoteric names, but yeah, jazz music was my entry. I was listening to the Beatles and Dylan, but what I was practicing was swing and bebop. And I don't have that kind of epiphany story, but we can skip ahead to India. When I went, the first time I went to India with my Zen wife, I almost said
Zen wife, yeah.
Was, we were actually looking for Ram Dass's guru, and we'll talk about that in a while. But my idea was there was a kind of quixotic journey, and tabla was sort of entering the vocabulary of jazz musicians. Zakir Hussain played with Miles Davis. So I was thinking, maybe I'll get into tabla a little bit. And Iris and I went to Benares, and we went to a performance in Benares Hindu University. It was a beautiful night. The sky was high. It was evening ragas, and it was a kind of outdoor amphitheater. And I laid back, because in India, you're always tired. And Raghu, they use the same expression. I went out. My eyes were half open. I was not asleep. My body lifted. And this was the music that was really my path into Hinduism. Because after that concert, I ended up living with this tabla guru at the university for several weeks while my wife went looking for Neem Karoli Baba. And I was moving around India to the rhythm of the tals, the 16-beat measures of of Indian music, classical music, and everything synchronized. The barking of a dog was like was part of the beat, and it was on the offbeat. And when I came back from India, I was chanting a very simple, what wasn't a bhajan, it was a kind of practice, a vocal practice that was what I used to bring me down when I came back to America, as many of us did, a bit more lost than found, until we regrounded.
Well, I can't actually. Again, the opposite happened. I was like that all the way till I got to Neem Karoli Baba. After that, then the only issue I had to. Well, he said it to us. I've done everything for you. Now I leave you the mind. Well, here I am. I'm still dealing with that issue. So, how did you even want to go to India? What happened there?
Well, that's a story. This was like 1973 or 4. And we were living in Boston, and Nixon was running for office. And we said, if Nixon gets reelected, we're leaving the country. In the meanwhile...
What about now?
Be here now again. Very much. But, classical Indian music through my focus was in the air. Also, yoga, was kind of coming into its own in America. And we were disillusioned with American culture. And I had picked up Be Here Now, Ram Dass's countercultural bestseller, in like 1971. And I had it on the side. And when we came to this decision, we opened a map and said, where could we go as far away and as far out as we can imagine? And it was India. And we took a map and we just said there. And that's how we ended up going to India in the first place, looking for Ram Dass's guru.
But that was 73-ish, 4?
Well,
He died in 73 in the fall.
Oh.
Neem Karoli Baba.
Exactly. Yeah. So we never found him. Iris went to a Shivananda ashram, and I stayed in Benares and lived with my very first guru, you could say, my tabla guru.
Yeah.
And he came from a very important lineage of tabla. And that was my introduction to Eastern spirituality.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, well, we're a little bit comparing trajectories. So jazz, music was everything to me.
Do you play an instrument?
Now I do as a practice kirtan, like Krishna Das, but I don't, I just do it for myself. Although we have monthly satsangs, community gatherings, and so I'll play then. I played with him for years before we had a record company together called Triloka. David was involved, actually. And that was in the 90s into the 2000s. And in the mid-90s is when he decided, I think I'll just make a vanity record. We can do what we want. We got a record company. We had real distribution and all that. And he did. And, of course, here he is today playing in front of thousands of people around the world. And by the way, anybody, if you're in Europe, he's doing a big tour in Europe. Here's a promo for KD. So we used to do this. Obviously, we came out of India. This was one of the big practices. Certainly, the main practice was this. And he had been a musician, singer before. He Blue Oyster Cult. Do you know this little note? They wanted him.
Yes, I know his story as well. In fact, I wrote to him when my book was coming out, and publishers ask you to get blurbs from people, in high places. And I wrote to him the same as I wrote to you. I don't know if you remember me, and I guess I left left an impression on some people. He said, "Of course, I remember you," but he was on tour in Europe, so he wasn't able to get to it.
Yeah, So anyhow, all's to say, yeah, it's more of a practice, not a musicianship thing. Do you still play drums?
I still play drums. Not tabla. When I came back from India, when I was studying tabla in India, culturally, contextually, it made a lot of sense. And when I came back, we were living in the Boston area, and I found my tabla guru's nephew at Wesleyan, or was it Brown? He went from Wesleyan to Brown University, and I studied with him for about a year or two, and it didn't make sense. And I kind of gave up drums for a while, but then in the late 70s, I got back into it. Now I play with 3 groups: a jazz quartet,
Wow.
a family trio, a guitar, bass, and drums. And I play with this great blues keyboardist. We play casual stuff. Well, Ira, the keyboardist, and I play at a senior center monthly. My daughter and son-in-law and I play at an acute care
that's so sweet.
center.
Oh, that's great.
And it's, I wrote somewhere on Facebook that my dad, who passed away 20 years ago, would be proud that the money he spent on my drum lessons was going to this rather than touring with Bruce Springsteen or something. But no, music really is my sadhana as well. If I can say, drums is so important because we talk about flow. We talk about, being in rhythm with life. When I'm not playing, I feel out of sync. But when I can keep the beat, it's all metaphorical.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm moving forward, and there's a raison d'etre. Writing, of course, is my profession, and I don't know if I would ever play professionally as a drummer, but I was on track as a high school kid and college to do that. But I thought I'd end up with some bar band, on the Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore, yeah, where he came from. But music. Now you've done a lot in music in terms of what your métier is, as they say in French.
What does that mean?
Your work, your career has certainly taken you into the music business, right? I mean, you've written a lot about music or musicians and so on.
I've written enough, but as we're talking about this, I've always been more interested in how my writing could be kind of guidance, spiritual lessons. And from the mid-'70s onward, and I had worked for the Boston Globe and the Newark, New Jersey Star Ledger, straight media. But at some point when the hit of, the Indians would call it nada, little touch of wisdom, I realized, well, writing is my medium of communication, and why not use that and infiltrate the straight world with stories that would have appeared in New Age Journal or Lion's Roar, Shambhala Sun. And I thought that's the gift I can give back. And playing drums is just, it's a balancing for me because it's more visceral. And writing happens up here, but playing drums happens in the lower chakra.
Yeah.
That's been fun.
Okay, so you even let's talk about Gandhi a little bit.
Sure.
I can tell you, and you say in the book a couple of quotes from Ram Dass. Of course, you have a nice little section there about him.
Yeah.
But how he said, how important Gandhi was to him. So this is something I don't know if you know, but when we first got to India, a bunch of us, the Westerners that had met Ram Dass and went over as a result of, he never told us where to go or even the name of this guru. But he said, to some like Krishnadas, he said, and a couple others, hey, write to my friend. He'll see if he can get you in. And that's a whole other incredible story, actually, about how that happened. And then others of us, like me, he said, well, write to me when you get to India, and we'll see.
Who was saying this to you?
Ram Dass,
Okay.
yeah. So I did that, and he didn't know where Neem Karoli Baba was in that moment. We went around the same time, in the fall of 70. He went maybe at the end of the summer. And ultimately, of course, we did meet up with him, and Ram Dass had arranged to get a meditation teacher to teach meditation, Vipassana, which I know you're familiar with. And they found a place in this extraordinary town, high up in the Himalayas, like the 25, 6, 7,000 foot peaks were right 50, 75 miles as the crow flies from this. And the whole horizon was these mountains. It's something else. It's a bucket list thing to do, Perry, let me tell you. Anyhow, so we did that, and we ended up in this place with Ram Dass at the Gandhi ashram. It was
This is not in Bodh Gaya.
No. This is way up in the Himalaya in a place called Kosani.
Kosani, yes.
Yeah. Those of you who are really interested in going to this bucket list place, you can write into Be Here Now Network on the info. So it was where he had written one of his books. I was trying to remember it actually before this conversation, but he wrote a book at this place, which I guess they renamed Gandhi Ashram. It has another name alongside it. And there was a kind of a little library that we all used to go into every week and do practice of one sort of meditation or chanting, whatever we were doing. Mm-hmm. And we just imbibed Gandhi, all of us, in that time that we were there doing this thing. So when I saw your book, I went, okay, this is right in the pocket. That's why I say we have similar trajectories, right?
Yes. I did not know about this place, and I read extensively Gandhi's life. Mm-hmm. What in my book, Becoming Gandhi, I noted when I recalled, my time with Ram Dass and the talks I went to, and we were close to him and back in America. I never recalled him talking about Gandhi. Mm. And my inference is that he had so imbibed Gandhi that it was part of him. He didn't need to, reference Mahatma Gandhi. It was, Ram Dass had become Gandhi in a certain way. But it was really enlightening for me to review, which in the book that I had read, that Rameshwar Das did with him.
Yeah, Be Loved Now, or Becoming Ram Dass, the memoir, or
I think it's called now? Being Ram Dass.
Being Ram Dass, yeah.
Yeah, the memoir.
Yeah, he used some of the things that you quoted him saying. He actually returned to it after the stroke when he was in Maui. He used to, the line about Gandhi said, "My life is my message," right? And he related well with that, I guess, after the stroke, because of course that his life so radically changed at that time.
It's, Ram Dass, formerly known as
Richard
Alpert. Thanks for the blanks, but did make his life his message.
Yeah.
In how he turned away from the material world and just became more and more a kind of living, dare I say, saint. But
yeah, Bob Thurman said that, and I don't know, just after he left, I believe, that just we have no idea because we don't have saints here,
Yeah.
And we have no idea. What does that really mean? It doesn't necessarily mean an enlightened being, a Neem Karoli Baba that is one with it all. There's no polarization, no me and you, none of that. It's hard to imagine, but when you're in its presence, it's extraordinary.
And
But
sorry.
No, just to say it's not what it is. Ram Dass ended up really, I've never seen a human be able to, as we were instructed, love everybody and tell the truth. Which, and you've got this all through the book. This is what Gandhi was. And so to get anywhere near there is very saintly.
Yeah. Saintly, I would call him. And as I would call, Gandhi was saintly, saint-ish. For your listeners, Mahatma means great soul. And it was not a nomenclature that he put in, used. It was Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, who called him that, and it became his handle. I do want to, I know your viewers can see us when you put this on YouTube, but I thought you'd get a kick out of seeing these two magazines that I had for a billion years. Egg on my beard was Ram Dass confessing that he messed up with the Joya. Yeah. And then there was this in New Times. Can you see it? Can you guys see it?
Yeah. Hold a little higher.
Go back, sorry, like 1974, I think it was. Yeah, 75.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Let me put this back on.
Yeah. Okay, so let's turn to the book. Why you have a chapter? So this makes it easy. Why Gandhi? Why now? Why me? Let's go there.
Yes. Why Gandhi? I was we go in cycles, I think, of like understanding ourselves and the world around us, and then we kind of fall off the cushion again, as the Zen saying goes. And I was at a place where I had hit a low, and I was, to be quite honest, I was waiting for a next book after my last book, which was called Buddha or Bust.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this one.
Yeah, no, I know the book. I don't think I've read it. You have to send me a copy.
I could do that, and David Silver knows about it. But when you hit a low point, that's a moment of turning your life around to go high. When I go low, I go high. And I looked around and I thought, who is a role model whose life was their message when I was looking for a moral compass I could live by. And as you said at the top of this conversation, it looked like to me that society had kind of lost its moral compass. It wasn't just Perry who had lost it. The world was not in a good place. Violence is on the uptick. Truth has become an endangered species, thanks to the former American president. But, these people are just mirrors of what's going on in society. Yeah. So why not Gandhi? Why Gandhi? Well, why not Gandhi? Because I just wanted to grab onto somebody whose principles I could try to follow. And then why me? As I said, I thought I need to kind of looking for Perry 2.0. Like, how can I be better? How can I improve my life? Let's try these. Everyone's trying all kinds of self-help, regimens. Why not this? So Gandhi's known for like from 6 to 11 principles that he followed himself and he prescribed. I took 6 of them, and it has changed my life, not dramatically. I'm not like 6'7" now when I've been 5'10" my whole life, but it certainly shifted my paradigm to look more closely at what I was doing that I could just kind of taper up or taper down. For instance, vegetarianism.
It's okay.
These things, I'm not used to them.
Yeah.
I could taper up or taper down, and vegetarianism was one example. I tried to go cold turkey vegetarian, and I was craving meat, protein, and so I toned down, and now I'm a pescatarian. But my message in my book is that you don't have to become Gandhi, ridiculously uh, 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 disciplined. But if you just turn the dial down or up in certain areas, life is about trying to improve yourself. Gandhi, I could say, if you let me go on, I tried to keep away in this book from talking about Gandhi's politics. It's complicated. It can be divisive. Muslims don't like him. Sikhs have an issue with him. The Black Lives Movement got really upset with Gandhi because of things he had said.
Really? This is something I don't know about.
I guess you missed this chapter.
Yeah.
Raghu. Gandhi, when he was in South Africa, which was like the first, he was in South Africa for about 25 years. He went to South Africa as a lawyer for a Muslim businessman, and he stayed there for many years. His ideas about passive resistance and satyagraha were all formed there. But he was really transformed into trying to be more British than Indian. When he went to law school in England, this was aspirational for Indians. And I've always had troubles with why Indians seem so enamored with the Brits, because the British were their rulers and in some ways brainwashed them in certain ways to be more bureaucratic than Indians are by nature. And I thought that Gandhi had said some things about the Zulus and the tribal peoples of South Africa that were not complimentary. And he was using words and phrases that would be considered really not PC at this time. He had called, can we go there a little bit?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. He'd called the Zulu savages, and his preferences were to protect the rights of Indians living in South Africa, because he was famously kicked off of the train in South Africa for sitting in a first-class section where he already had a first-class ticket, but he was dark, so they thought he was black.
Right.
And they kicked him off because blacks were not allowed in that section. It politicized him in a way, or was one of the things that politicized him. So I had taken on this little hobby as I was writing my book to track all of the statues of Gandhi that had been vandalized, pulled down, desecrated.
Really?
Here in California, there was one in Sacramento, even. And I was in England, and I saw one there. In South Africa, in Gandhi Square, there was one that was torn down and painted over. And so African Americans had an issue with that. I understood it because, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, we used terms for African Americans that you wouldn't hear today. Even the term Negro would not be used now. So he was using terms that were quite dated, and he was a young guy. By the time he came back to India 25 years later, he looked at his past in South Africa in a different way. So that's one group that had an issue with him.
But he also, of course, he did have an, shall we say, antiquated purview around women that were sexually abused. I mean, that also. This is good. This is a good example we were talking about. A saint doesn't mean you're enlightened. He's obviously still had plenty of polarized stuff going on. Due to his upbringing, due to the social structure of being in India, in Africa, that was a huge thing. He's a good example because he certainly was a saintly being that offered so much to the world, and still does. And these little kerfuffly things, these little, what would Ram Dass call them? His
fuck ups.
Oh boy, yeah. This is great.
Exactly that. And women have an issue with him, and I would say, not to defend him, but to just explain the context. He was Indian. Indians have a hierarchical attitude about men and women. I've seen examples of it, in the upper classes of Indians. Even there's a sense that women can achieve what men do, and in the villages, it's even more so. And in a lot of ways, it was his work to transcend all that, and he did to a degree. Kasturba was Gandhi's wife, and the famous film Gandhi, the Richard Attenborough film, depicts him a certain way, and there's some truth to it and some Hollywoodization of Gandhi's life.
Yeah.
But nobody's perfect, and even in his later years, he was working on himself. He was working on himself, as we say. And the greatest shame and the greatest irony of Gandhi's life is the man who was known as an advocate of nonviolence was murdered by a zealot Hindu assassin, as was Martin Luther King, as was Bobby Kennedy, as was some of our other great leaders, the Kennedys.
Yeah. There's one thing here I wanted to share. You talk about empathy, and I'd like to parse empathy and compassion.
This is so interesting. You're bringing this up. Go ahead.
Just, I think that this is me, what I think. Certainly, without encountering within yourself empathy as you look out all around you, God willing, that happens automatically. Every human has it, unless it's been covered up and trumped on by virtue of how you grew up and where you grew up and all of that. But compassion is a whole other jump from empathy. It's more of an action. I just wanted to see what you thought.
What I said, it's interesting you brought this up, because I actually proposed a story recently to the New York Times and the Washington Post, comparing empathy and compassion.
Oh, really? Oh.
And I was drawing, as you note in the beginning of my book, I say that one of the things I learned from trying to become Gandhi was empathy. I just have greater feeling for people's pain, which I, kind of intellectually understood from writing about Buddhism. But our old friend, who we know as Jagannath Das,
Danny,
the world knows as Dr. Daniel Goleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence and many books, now is writing, further books. He has a book called Optimal that just came out, and Why We Meditate was his previous book.
Yeah, great, with Tsoknyi Rinpoche. Great book, by the way. Everybody.
Yes, very good. He writes a lot about empathy, and he's, says empathy is integral to leadership and in the corporate world. And then I gave a talk at the University of Rhode Island Center for Peace, and a Tibetan who has a PhD in Buddhism. His name is Tenzin Tendor, I think his name is. He writes about compassion. And so I was trying to say, which is more important? And only recently I came to read more to see that empathy is a feeling you have for others. Compassion is when you enact, you take action on it. I did think that they were used interchangeably, but I was wrong. So now I'm thinking more about how do I act out my empathy in compassionate ways. Well, I don't know if this is a cop-out, but I often cop out to this, that my writing is my compassion, because I've since 40 years, I'm always putting a little drop of understanding, whether it's from the psychological point of view, from the health point of view, or spirituality, how the actions we can take to kind of heighten our sense of how we can be in the world and help people in the world.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about you. Why has that come up for you a lot?
Very, very pointedly around action. The sitting around watching the news and being horrified is one thing.
Yeah.
Sitting around in many different places where you're actually witnessing suffering or whatever it may be, and empathetic mood comes upon one. That's another thing.
Yeah.
And then really looking in a compassionate way at some of the suffering that you're personally encountering, or that's not personal, but you have this deep feeling of wanting to take action. Then you're getting into how you are doing the act. Where's it coming from? Where's the motivations, the self-interest, all of it? I have a great friend named Duncan Trussell, who I do podcasts with. He's a really well-known podcaster. And he tells an outrageous story of wanting to go help. And he was in LA and he went down to, wherever, East LA. And he brought with him cans of food and stuff. And the way that he saw himself in action, compassionate action, it made him feel so awful because he was looking for results, or he saw his motivations of, now I'm a good person. I'm handing out food, whatever. It was so awful. He went on a rant on a podcast about it.
That's
so
funny.
yeah,
That's
so
funny.
that is absolutely, present with any. Ram Dass, of course, used to say, you can't take any action, social action, until you've cleaned your own house, so to speak,
Right.
cleaned your heart. And, but you can't wait till you do that, because you could wait a long time before you are no longer polarized. But you can absolutely work in yourself, and of course do what's necessary in taking compassionate action. The best person we know, Roshi Bernie Glassman, do you know who that is?
Sure.
Yeah. And what he did in terms of taking people to the most, to the camps in Poland and Germany, and meditate there and bring that in, and really being able to convert that energy. And of course, what he did in New York, Ram Dass went with him, and they just were going to be homeless.
Yes, I remember this. FYI, in my last book, The Buddha or Bust, and I wrote a piece for National Geographic, which was the stepping stone to Buddha or Bust. I did that Auschwitz retreat.
With Bernie?
It wasn't with Bernie. It was with a guy who was like second or third in command.
But from the Peacemakers.
I did a bearing witness retreat. Yes, Peacemakers. You remember? I don't remember his name. But we sat for 5 days at Auschwitz. We sat literally on the tracks at the iconic entrance to Auschwitz, where I lost great aunts and uncles from Poland there. And it was one of the most moving, saddening, but uplifting in a weird way experiences. So I know the value of that. I could say in my books, but especially in the Becoming Gandhi, my act of compassion, you could say, was this little story. Sounds True is the publisher, and they're well known for doing books by Howard Brock and some of the great luminaries of Western Buddhism. I said, I'm not one of them. I'm just me, a working journalist, and I'm not going to write a how-to book. And when I handed in my first manuscript, the editors loved it, and she cried one page, she laughed on another, which is what you always want to hear. She said, but could you end the chapter with a kind of summary? Like, what do you do? And I joked her, I said, you want me to write a how-to ending? So I kind of with tongue in cheek came up with this thing that you've read about at the end of each chapter. It's how to Gandhi mindfully, how to Gandhi vegetarianly, how to Gandhi simplicity. And I thought, well, this really harks back to what I was doing early in my career, where we used to call it service journalism, like a how to whatever. And I felt and I feel that there was a place for that in this book. That okay, here's what Gandhi did, what Gandhi said, what in the zeitgeist of the world today, why it's relevant, but what do we do about it? Okay, here's the information. You have empathy. Now, where's your compassion? So that became part of the book, which was not what I had planned, but ipso facto, it became obvious that if I'm going to become Gandhi, if I'm going to recommend how to become Gandhi, what do you got? Perry, tell us what to do.
Yeah. No, it's, and you do list you put in 6 Gandhian things: truth, vegetarianism,
6 principles I followed.
Nonviolence.
Yes.
What else? Simplicity, faith, and celibacy.
Yes.
You might have a problem with celibacy, though.
I myself were telling people to become.
All of us, Westerners. You know what Neem Karoli Baba told us about celibacy?
I'd like to hear.
Of course, you know that he didn't teach and he didn't give talks and he didn't write, but there was nothing. There was actually, even just relating with him was on a non-rational basis. But he would say things like, yes, celibacy and brahmacharya, one person, not so much.
What does that mean?
In other words, he would say real brahmacharya is not having a thought in your head. And nobody's going there. Okay, for you little Western hippies that are sitting in front of me, you just, monogamy and don't go crazy screwing your...
Exactly. And I have a parallel line that is embedded in my mind from the teachings of Ram Dass at talks he gave and many talks I went to. He'd say pushing away is as wrongful as pulling towards you.
Yeah, right.
There's attachment and non-attachment, but if we're involved in the race for grace, as Krishna Bush used to put it, that so in a parallel way, if we're thinking I'm not into sex, you're already into sex,
Yeah.
And I know in contemporary society it's very hard, but as I point out, that's part of the process. We're bombarded with images of sexuality, sex sells, as the expression goes. And how do we turn off from that? It's not easy. And as my editor, when I submitted this book, said, well, how does being celibate bring you to a more moral life? And it doesn't. Celibacy and living a moral life, I don't think have much to do with each other. People say, well, you're moving your energies from down there to up here. I agree with that. But how do you do that when we're being bombarded and it's, subliminal impulse, almost Darwinian impulse to procreate?
Yeah. And how about the fact that how all these teachers from the East, one, Me Too after another? I mean, so doesn't that say that might be a difficult task? And it's really pernicious if you're saying, I am a celibate, and then you go out and do all this stuff and abuse people.
And the Catholic Church.
So it goes on. And so that's why I like Maharaji. It's okay, just... if you're thinking about it, you ain't celibate, so forget that and just calm down a little bit. That's all he was saying. Just calm down a little bit to 23, 4, 5-year-olds. So one thing I got to bring up before we have to get off is because we're talking about compassion. And then soon after that, you talk about the most compassionate being that's on the planet right now, as far as I can tell, and I spent a lot of time with him in teachings, is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. How did that come, you lucky guy?
Well, it came actually because in the first place, when National Geographic magazine assigned me to write about the resurgence of Buddhism in a popular way in the West, they said, I said, I'll go to the East to find the answers. And among the people I proposed to interview was His Holiness the Dalai Lama. My hook was I had heard that he was a big fan of National Geographic magazine.
Oh.
So I wrote to him at the time, and it took months and months for them to get back to me. And finally, they approved an interview, and I went to Dharamsala, and I had this amazing, as everyone would say, an amazing time with him. A 45-minute interview turned into an hour and a half because I went to the village where His Holiness was born.
Oh, really?
And I brought back a message. In a little village called, what was it called? I can't remember now. So I went there. It was a very humble little village. And I met his nephew who oversees the monastery where His Holiness was born. And I had one of those journalistic epiphanies, like, I'm interviewing this guy. My translator spoke Tibetan. And I said, I'm going to interview the Dalai Lama, your uncle, in 6 weeks. Tell him what you'd like to tell him. Because, he's in India now. So through translation, I heard the man say, Holiness, uncle, he said, uncle, every day we hope and pray you will return to Tibet. And of course, that's an impossibility. But I brought the tape of this conversation to the interview with His Holiness, and Raghu, it shifted the whole energy. I queued up the tape, and I had like a headset, and I said, here, listen. And he listened for 3 minutes, and his brow furrowed, and he went into another place of memory, I'm sure. He knew this nephew. And so another kind of connection happened. So I wrote a chapter in Buddha or Bust that won some accolades as in the best Buddhist writing category. And so years later, I wrote to him. I approached Dan Goleman to see if he would write the foreword. And he said he can't because there's a conflict. He had a book coming out. And from the outside, Tara, his wife, said, how about His Holiness? And I giggled, and Danny giggled, and he said, well, you should write to this guy, Jeremy Russell, and just see if if you can get some traction. So long story short, he did approve it, and he wrote something. His group of his committee probably wrote it.
Yeah.
And it really, I felt it was like a blessing. Even my book never sells one copy.
Yeah.
It's a blessing that I'm commissioned to spread the Dharma just because of that. So you could say nepotism in a way, the connection of our Sangha.
That's wonderful. And just being with him is wonderful as well.
The chapter I wrote, I titled that chapter, He Had Me at Hello.
Yeah.
There's a cute story behind that. Wow. But now my publisher has said, it's okay for you to send the book to him because it's not cheap to send it to India. And so I'm doing that this coming week. But I had this idea to propose in my email to them. Better yet, let me bring the book to you. And, an excuse to spend 15 minutes and get a selfie with the Dalai Lama. Yeah. But, after I interviewed him that time, and we're going back to 2004, he attends the meetings of the parliament of the Tibet government in exile. And I was told about it, so I could go down to the parliament office. I don't know how this word spread, but as I was approaching where the parliament building is, the side of the road was lined with people who just want a moment. The Tibetans feel that even if, they share the air, from a distance, they are blessed for life. And I was privileged at the moment because I just interviewed him, and I stood near the front of the crowd, and he noticed me, and he, pointed, and I want to think, in my romantic memory that he gave me a hug, but I kind of doubt that. But he gave me what we call now a virtual hug.
Yeah. No. Oh, so, that's so great, Perry.
Yeah, it's a good story. Yeah, can I tell one more story?
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Yeah.
So a good story. So when I was reading about the stories of the Dalai Lamas, and I don't know if your listeners know how the Dalai Lamas are selected, but they put these toys in front of 2-year-olds, and a possession of the 13th Dalai Lama was put in front of him, and he apparently picked the right toy that was the 13th Dalai Lama's toy, and that's how the 14th Dalai Lama was picked. The story is that the 13th Dalai Lama was passing through, and this would have been in the early 1920s, I guess. He was passing through these beautiful valleys and hills of Tibet, and he was at a stupa, and he looked across the valley and he saw this little village whose name I can't remember. And the 13th Dalai Lama said, "This is where I'll take my next incarnation." And I turned to His Holiness in this interview and I recounted this story, and he smiled, that wry smile he has, and he says, "It's a good story."
That's great. That's really great.
So I go with that.
Yeah. Oh my. I want to sort of close here. We listed all of the Gandhian, not all, the ones that you brought up, that we can all absorb into our lives. It doesn't mean anyone's going to accomplish anything. There's no accomplishing, but it's certainly, you get reminded in this book that this is a wonderful thing to reintroduce, in a way, Gandhi, especially to next gen. We have a lot of people listening
Thank you.
that would appreciate this and who he is. And, there's also who he wasn't, and we've been honest about that, and you are honest about that in this book. But there's one thing here that caught me, and I have to say, it's towards the end of the book when you started talking about faith, right? And you asked different people, different traditions, Zen and Roman Catholic and modern Orthodox Jews and Buddhists. What does that mean to you? So I don't know who these monks are at the Dharma Realm Buddhist Association, which sounds like a very hoity-toity thing, but I'm just going to read a little, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With my Christian friends, the emphasis is on the faith aspect. If you believe in Jesus, you are saved. So is the corollary. Corollary, hard word. If you don't believe in Jesus, you're damned. Forever. Forever? Wow, I don't know if I can really swallow that kind of belief. I find faith is something like a trust that grows over time. So, for example, let's say my faith or my trust in Buddhism or this organization comes from trying out the practices and seeing myself little bit by little bit change, kind of becoming a little bit more open-minded. So here, there's a sense of like, I can trust that this leads to a good place based on my own experience. I think that's probably the deepest place I trust, is the trying out and saying, okay, I think I can see this works. That is so, there's a little bit more to it around it. That is, to me, the most important thing for people on the path. In terms of all these decades that both of us have been focused that way, is trust. It's what happened to me when I first met Ram Dass, another story I've told a billion times. When I first met him in Montreal, I had a intuitive trust that this person was not interested in whatever he needed or whatever he wanted, as Richard or as Ram Dass, Richard Alpert. It was, what did I need? And that engendered this kind of trust that has been with me for to this point in my life. Of course, led me to go to India, that trust. And I think everybody should really relate with, faith is a big word and it's very religious and it's all that stuff. That's why I love what he said here. Just developing a trust. It's like, these Gandhian principles, engaging with them and trusting, as this gentleman, whoever he is, said, gradually a change happens. And you start trusting that. It makes a huge difference in being able to be in this very difficult time that we are in.
Very well put, Raghu. I'm thinking of what you said, that Ram Dass said, and what all these spiritual leaders say. And I'm reflecting on this word transactional. Like, I feel like we there's too many people who are in transactional relationships. When you don't want anything, when back, like when you give of yourself without attachment to an outcome. I'm drawing on Buddhism here.
Buddhism, Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita, it's all
of the
all
isms, that you're closer to faith. And as you said, there's some sort of intuition that I can trust this person. But then, as I think I quote Emily Dickinson, faith is a fine invention for gentlemen, you see, but microscopes are necessary in an emergency. In other words, like the Buddha said, don't trust anything except your own experience of it. So I'm here to testify that that trying out these Gandhian principles increased my awareness, my sense of faith, my curiosity about what is faith, and just the examined life is what I've been practicing for 40 or 50 years. And that's all we can do, really. And then as a result, things unfold in a good way, hopefully.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Trust, everybody. That is trust. Anyhow, Becoming Gandhi, Perry Garfinkel. And everybody, you go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, look at the show notes. There'll be a link to get the book, link to Perry. And I really thank you for, as I said just now, reintroducing Gandhi to an audience that we all, never mind introduce. Doesn't matter. We can all use these principles as jumping off points to really be more mindful about our lives.
Yes.
No?
Thank you. Thank you to Jane Evans, who reminded me that you exist.
Jane, our mutual friend.
Hi, Janie. And I've been to Ojai a few times. I would love to see you in person.
Definitely. If
spend an evening.
You're not that far.
Yeah, Berkeley to Ojai.
Yeah.
But thank you.
That's another book, From Berkeley to Ojai. Oh, God. Great to see you again, Perry. And,
good to see you.
Everybody, as I said, go to BeHereNowNetwork.com. Not only you will get Mindrolling, you will get Ram Dass, Alan Watts, and we're about to introduce Perry Krishnamurti podcast. How about that? So,
Krishnamurti had a center in Ojai, right?
He does. He does. Yeah, it's just down not far. It's like 5 minutes from where I live, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really cool. So, everybody, we shall see you next week. And thank you again, Perry.
Thank you. Thank you.